Welcome to Case Briefs with Megan. Let's make this case brief. Oh my god, still in that business law class? Well, today let's talk about Watteau versus Fenwick. Remember how we talked about actual versus apparent authority? This is another one of those cases. And it involves a little imbibing. And even though this case takes place in ye olde England, this is still a really good case in order to kind of demystify the differences between actual versus apparent authority. So there's this guy, Humble, and Humble owns a tavern. But you know what? It's tough running your own business, so you know what Humble decides to do? He decides to sell it to some brewers. However, he's got one really easy condition, which, if you're an employer, is fantastic. He just wants to stay and work, so the brewers already have an employee built into this business. And even though they probably should have transferred everything over, the brewers see that Humble's name is on the door and his name is also on the license, and while he's still working there, it's easy enough to just kind of keep things as is. However, the brewers are still the ones that are in charge of the business now, so they have most of the buying power. They do decide to leave some power with Humble just to buy mineral water and ales, you know, the things that Humble is selling, and probably has a really good idea of what's missing and what they need to order. However, Humble is still kind of acting like the manager who steps down and still kind of acts like a manager. Because Humble doesn't exactly tell the brewers everything that he's buying. Humble's buying other stuff. He's buying cigars, he's buying meat stuff, he's buying a couple things that he technically wasn't authorized to be able to buy, but he still buys it on the tavern's credit. So anything that he is buying, the brewers are eventually going to have to pay. And Watteau, the guy who's selling Humble all of this stuff, one day gets fed up because Humble hasn't been paying, and so he sues the brewers. That's right, the brewers are Fenwick. And so they go to trial, and Fenwick's like, we never authorized Humble to go and buy cigars. We never authorized him to act as our agent. He doesn't have any authority to act on our behalf. Therefore, we shouldn't have to pay Watteau for this stuff. It should be Humble. And Watteau, he comes back and he's like, I didn't even know you guys existed. I have no reason not to believe that Humble wasn't in charge. I had no clue that you guys were even a factor in all of this game. So the question is, did Humble have actual or apparent or even any authority at all to act on behalf of Fenwick? And the answer that the court comes up with is that Humble had actual authority. Now the question is, why? Well, let's think about the relationship in terms of agency here. We've got the principal, which is Fenwick, we've got the agent, which is Humble, and we've got a third party, which is Watteau. To Watteau, he didn't even know about Fenwick and these guys up here, he only knew about Humble. What we would call Fenwick is an undisclosed principal. So, when you've only got this linear relationship right here between Humble and Watteau, the courts held that if it kind of looks like there's nobody else controlling your agent here and that the agent has nobody saying that they can't do something, that they have no reason to believe that there's somebody else in charge, the undisclosed principal can be held liable for those actions taken by the agent, even if the undisclosed principal told them not to do that. Let's think about it again. Humble's name is on the door, his name is on the license. Likely everybody in that town knows Humble as the barkeep. It would make sense that Watteau would believe that Humble's the one in charge of making all the purchases too, even if it's outside of drinks, even if it's just cigars or whatever else he wants to buy. I know we brought up apparent authority before, but unfortunately we can't even use apparent authority here because our principals up here, the Fenwick, they didn't do any sort of what we call holding out. In other words, Fenwick did really no such thing to show Watteau that they were in charge and they had control of the situation. Or rather, that they had any control over Humble at all. And that is just another fun little case on authority. And if this case teaches you anything, when you get a business, change the license and make sure it's in your name.